Greetings and
recording in progress.
Everyone, and welcome to the State Water Board's Curtailment Compliance and Response Assistance webinar for the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta Watershed. My name is Jenna-Lynn Guzman. I am an environmental scientist at the State Water Board's Office of Public Participation, and I will be facilitating today's webinar. In the morning session, your staff provided an overview of the curtailment and certification of compliance requirements. And if you were unable to attend the morning session, a recording will be posted on our Delta Drought and Curtailment webpage for future reference. The URL for that is waterboards.ca.gov/drought/delta. In this portion of the webinar, staff will discuss the enhanced reporting of water diversion and use that is required under the orders issued on August 20th for water rights and claims in the Delta watershed with an annual diversion amount of 5,000 acre-feet or more. Next slide, please. So before we get started, we'd like to go over some logistics. First, this webinar and its chat are being recorded. The video recording will be posted on the Delta Drought and Curtailment webpage within the next couple of days. This webinar is also being webcast on the Cal EPA website at video.calepa.ca.gov as in Victor. And we request that you watch the webcast if you do not intend to ask questions during the webinar. So this session will consist of two parts. First will be the staff presentation, followed by a question and answer session. And if you are joining by Zoom, you can enter in your questions through the chat at any time during the staff presentation, and we'll do our best to answer them when we get to the Q&A session. And the chat box can be found at the bottom of your screen at the taskbar, and there should be a chat icon. If you are calling in or watching the webcast, you can email your questions into our email address, which is bay-delta@waterboards.ca.gov using the subject line 831 webinar question. We recognize that you may have questions that are specific to your circumstance, and we kindly ask you to email in any of those specific and unique questions rather than chatting them during this webinar. Our goal is to answer questions that are applicable to multiple water right holders. And also we want to better understand and more accurately respond to any of those unique or specific questions through one-on-one communication. And finally, if you have any additional questions or would like to follow up with staff after the webinar, you can contact us by that same email, bay-delta@waterboards.ca.gov, or by phone through 916-319-0960, and leave a message and staff will get back to you as soon as possible. And with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Diane Riddle to introduce staff.
Thank you, Jenna-Lynn. Again, my name is Diane Riddle. I'm one of the Assistant Deputy Directors in the Division of Water Rights with the State Water Board. Welcome to the afternoon session of the webinar. As shown on this slide, we will begin this session with a brief overview of the emergency regulation and the reporting requirements authorized by the regulation. We will then discuss the enhanced reporting requirements in detail, including who the requirements apply to and why the information is required. Then staff will walk through the steps of how to access and submit the online form. Finally, we will close with a question and answer session. With that brief introduction to the afternoon session, I will now turn it over to Alyssa Campbell, who will provide a short overview of the emergency regulation and reporting requirements.
Thank you, Diane.
First, I'll provide a brief recap of some of the events leading up to the curtailment and reporting orders. On July 27th, State Water Board staff held an informational workshop to provide an overview of the proposed emergency reporting and curtailment regulation for the Delta watershed and updates to the water unavailability methodology, and to receive public input. The State Water Board adopted the emergency regulation at the August 3rd State Water Board meeting. The regulation was submitted to the Office of Administrative Law for review and was approved and became effective on August 19th. On Friday, August 20th, initial orders imposing water right curtailment and reporting requirements were issued to all water right holders and claimants in the Delta watershed. Next slide, please. As discussed during the morning session of this webinar, the August 20th order sets forth several reporting requirements for diverters throughout the Delta watershed. This slide summarizes these emergency regulation reporting requirements and their respective deadlines. The compliance certification, human health and safety certification, and non-consumptive use certification were all discussed in detail during the morning session of this webinar, but I will go over those requirements again briefly. If you would like more information on these reporting requirements, please refer to the recording of this morning's session of the webinar after it has been posted to the Delta Drought and Curtailment webpage. All water right holders and claimants who received the August 20th order must complete the Delta Watershed Compliance Certification Form by September 3rd. This form must be completed for each water right or claim for which an August 20th order was issued, even if the water right or claim is not currently curtailed. The purpose of this form is for water right holders and claimants to certify that they have and will continue to take actions needed to comply with the August 20th order, including monitoring their curtailment status. The next two certification forms listed here are for requesting an exception to curtailment. An exception to curtailment may be authorized if the water right or claim is used only for non-consumptive use, that is, all water is returned to the stream, or water diverted under the water right or claim is the diverter's only source of water and it is needed for minimum human health and safety needs. If you wish to seek an exception for either purpose, you must submit either the Human Health and Safety Certification Form or Non-Consumptive Use Certification Form using the State Water Board's online survey portal. Both of these forms are due by September 10th, even if your water right or claim is not currently curtailed. The enhanced reporting of prior diversions and projected demand form is required for all diverters with a face value or reported diversions in 2018 or 2019 of 5,000 acre feet or greater. This form asks for information on prior diversions and projected demand to inform water demand estimates and the curtailment process in the Delta watershed. Shortly, my colleague Jesse Jankowski will provide more detailed information on the enhanced reporting form. I will now turn the presentation over to Jesse to provide a recap of how to check the curtailment status of your water right.
Thank you, Alyssa. Again, I'm Jesse Jankowski. I'm a water resource control engineer with the Division of Water Rights. As a quick reminder of the instructions I gave this morning, any water user can regularly check the curtailment status of their water right or claim in the Delta Watershed Curtailment Status List on the Delta Drought website, which is waterboards.ca.gov/drought/Delta. You'll have to scroll a little ways down the page to see the list. On the top, it notes the date it was last updated. It will continue to be updated weekly or even more frequently if there are changes in precipitation and runoff. Up above the list, there's also a general description of the areas of the Delta watershed where curtailments are currently in effect. Water rights or claims with a status in red are under curtailment for the entirety of the specified time period, so the entire month of August or the entire month of September, as shown here, and may not divert water unless an exception applies. Water rights with a status in green are not under curtailment. though this is not an authorization to divert if water right terms or other conditions apply which affect your authorization to divert. You can scroll through the list to view the status of all water rights in the watershed. Click the icons at the top of each column to sort them alphabetically, or use the search boxes and drop-downs up above the list to search for specific water rights or claims. The possible searches include water right ID, owner name, water right or claim type, sub-watershed, and a filter for diversions in or outside of the legal delta. With much more detailed instructions, the Delta Watershed Curtailment Status List tutorial video will be posted on the Delta Drought website soon. Next slide, please. Now I will discuss the enhanced reporting form in depth. The purpose of this form is to collect information on actual recent diversions and projected demands for water under your water right or claim in order to better inform future demand assumptions and curtailments. Only water rights or claims that divert 5,000 acre-feet or more annually, either based on their face value or their 2018 and 2019 diversion reports, are currently required to submit an enhanced reporting form. These users received a different version of the August 20th curtailment order explaining this requirement. This is under the response required heading on the third page of the initial curtailment orders. And these water rights and claims are also the only ones which will have the Delta Watershed enhanced reporting of actual diversions and projected demand form visible when logged into the survey portal. The first enhanced reporting forms must be completed and submitted by September 10th, 2021. Subsequent forms will be due by the 10th day of each month through July 2022, unless otherwise specified by the State Water Board. You can access these forms at public.waterboards.ca.gov with the login information provided on the bottom of the third page of the initial order you received in the mail. Keep in mind that each water right has a separate login, and you must submit a different enhanced reporting form for each water right or claim that is subject to this requirement. Next slide, please. The enhanced reporting form asks for two different categories of information. The first category is actual diversions in previous months that have not yet been provided as part of annual water use forms. This information will help to inform the board how water users responded to drought conditions prior to curtailment orders being issued this year. The second category is projected demands for the next 3 months, assuming curtailments are not in place under this or any other order. The projected demand information will be used to refine demand estimates for the purposes of future curtailments. The first form asks for diversions that occurred in January through July 2021 and projected demands for September through November 2021. August and September diversion data will be requested in the next monthly form, which will be due on October 10th. And future enhanced reporting forms will only ask for the prior month's diversion data and a rolling 3-month window of projected demands in the future. All numbers in this form should be reported in volumes of acre-feet per month. It's important to note that projected demands should not be the same as anticipated diversions. Instead, projections should represent the amount of water that would be anticipated to be used under a right or claim if water is available at its priority and in the absence of curtailment orders. Actual diversions may not match projected demands for a variety of reasons, including limited water availability and any active curtailment orders. Projections should reflect the best available estimates at the time of submission, and understandably, these might change between monthly forms as hydrologic conditions and associated circumstances change. It is critical that reporting be as accurate as possible and avoid duplicate counting of diversions or demands, either in multiple data fields or across multiple water rights or claims. For multiple rights that cover the same place of use, diversions and demands should be reported under the most senior water right or claim up to its maximum diversion amount first, before reporting under more junior rights or claims. Next slide, please. Excuse me. In each month, diversions or projected demands are divided into 5 different categories in the enhanced reporting form. The first category, direct diversions for consumptive use, includes direct diversions for irrigation, municipal, industrial, or other beneficial uses that consume water. This would also include any water that was diverted to storage but then consumptively used within the same 30-day period. But this would not include diversion of water that was stored in a previous month and delivered or used at a later date, such as contract deliveries. The distinction between storage for less than a month and storage for a longer period is made here for the purposes of obtaining data in a format that can be used for determining water unavailability on a monthly time step. These numbers should represent actual stream diversions and should not subtract water that returns to the stream after diversion due to agricultural runoff, municipal discharges, etc. Only the water directly diverted for consumptive use under this water right should be reported here. Diversions that are met by another water right or claim, such as contracted storage releases, should only be reported under that water right or claim and not included here. Again, we're wanting to avoid double counting of diversion values between rights and claims wherever possible. So the second category, direct diversions for non-consumptive use, would be returned to the stream and made available for other users downstream within the same month. This could include run-of-river hydropower generation, fish and wildlife preservation, or other uses that do not consume water or only consume negligible quantities of water. This would also include any water that was diverted to storage, but then subsequently released for non-consumptive use within the same month. The form for this category also asks for clarification if any water was released to a different stream besides the source from which it was diverted due to an interbasin transfer. The third category, diversions to storage, would include water stored for any purpose and held beyond the month in which it was diverted. In the case of multiple rights with overlapping consumptive and non-consumptive uses, such as a reservoir that stores water for both municipal and hydropower uses, diversions to storage should only be reported under the consumptive use right in order to avoid double counting of these volumes. These questions also include a box where you can list any water right IDs associated with these overlapping rights or claims and provide an explanation if this is the case. The fourth category is water released from storage for consumptive uses. So this would include any water that was already held in storage and released for use during the month in question. This might include contractual deliveries, summer irrigation, or municipal treatment purposes. Releases to meet water quality or flow requirements downstream should also be included here if they would not be considered abandoned within the Delta watershed, and they're therefore not available for diversion by other water right holders or claimants downstream. These numbers should not include water that was stored and used within the same month. Contract deliveries of stored water should only be reported under the right which stored the water, again, not reported by the parties that are re-diverting previously stored water. Finally, in the fifth category, some releases of water from storage would be considered abandoned and available for downstream use within the Delta watershed. This might include hydropower releases or releases to meet in-stream flows for only a specific stream reach. This should not include water stored and released within the same month. And it should not include releases that serve an overlapping consumptive use right or claim. Those should be, of course, reported as released for consumptive use. Next slide, please. So the enhanced reporting form is submitted via the Water Rights Form and Survey Submittal portal that is located online at public.waterboards.ca.gov. And that uses the same login information as the other forms we've described this morning, which is provided in your initial orders on the third page. If your initial order does not mention monthly reporting in the heading on the middle of the third page, or when you log in, you don't see the Delta Watershed enhanced reporting of actual diversions and projected demand form, like you can see on the screenshot here, when you're logged into the survey portal, that water right is not subject to the enhanced reporting requirements. Do keep in mind that every water right or claim has separate logging credentials, and you must submit an individual enhanced reporting form for each of your water rights or claims that have a face value or 2018 or 2019 annual diversion amount of 5,000 acre-feet or more. Please feel free to contact staff if you are uncertain if you are subject to the enhanced reporting requirements, and we can help sort you out. So to start the form, after logging into the survey portal, you should click the survey link to the right of the enhanced reporting line here. We do understand that these forms may take some time to fill out, so water users can save responses, exit the form, and return later to complete and submit it at any time. On any page, the data entries in the forms will be saved upon clicking the next or previous buttons at the bottom of the page. Do note that you may still need to fill in the required fields, but you can easily save by clicking one of those buttons and returning later. Upon completion of the form, users can view, save, or print a copy of their submissions by clicking a summary link to the right of that enhanced reporting line on the homepage, which you can see here, and then the show as PDF link at the bottom of the page, which Mara demonstrated earlier this morning. Submitted information can also be modified by following that survey link again, which will lead you through the pages with your already saved responses pre-populated. Modifications can be made to these enhanced reporting submissions until the 10th of each month, as we discussed, closing at roughly midnight on the 10th, after which the form will close. If you need to make changes after that date, we can try to accommodate those. You should please send an email to the bay-delta@waterboards.ca.gov email address explaining the circumstances for making a change to that data. So I didn't show any of the individual reporting pages today in the form. I wanted to spend some more time explaining what these data categories are and why they're important. But the Delta Watershed Enhanced Reporting Form tutorial video will be posted on the Delta Drought website very soon with much more detailed instructions for completing these forms. With that, I will move to the next slide and hand the presentation back to Jenilyn.
And thank you, Jesse. So that concludes the staff presentation portion, and next we'll do the question and answer session. But before that, we want to provide a 10-minute break just so folks can get their questions in, and on our end, we can take a look before we respond. So if you would like to submit a question and you're participating through Zoom, at the bottom of your screen on your taskbar, you should see a chat button. So you can type and send your question through there. If you are calling in or participating by watching our webcast, you can email your question to bay-delta@waterboards.ca.gov if you haven't done so already. And with that, we'll resume back at 1:35. Thanks, everyone. Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had an opportunity to send in your questions. To streamline things, we're trying to consolidate any questions that are similar, so please keep that in mind if you have not heard your question asked verbatim. Additionally, we will not be addressing questions that are circumstance specific at this time. So if you do have a question that's specific to your water right or circumstance, please email them to bay-delta@waterboards.ca.gov or call us at 916-309-0960 and leave a voicemail giving your information or contact information, and staff will return your call as soon as possible. So at any time during this Q&A session, if you have follow-up questions or a question pops up, you can drop that in the chat or email us at that bay-delta@waterboards.ca.gov email using the subject line 8-31 webinar question. And with that, I will move to our first question. It's more of an acknowledgement. We had a detailed situational question received from someone from Placer County Water Agency. So we just want to acknowledge that we received your question and we'll be following up with you offline. The next question is on the curtailment list, what does the green block indicating not curtailed mean?
Yeah, could we actually move back to slide 34? Thank you. We'll try to discuss this with a specific example. So apologize for singling out a single water right and water right holder, but let's take a look at this top water right owned by Glen Clusat Irrigation District. So the current curtailment status of this water right claim for August is that it is curtailed. Diversions are not permitted under this water right, subject to this regulation for the remainder of August. So that would be ending today. Based on current conditions, however, in September, this water right is not curtailed. So it is not subject to curtailment under these regulations. However, this is not an outright authorization to divert. There are many other specific conditions of water rights which might apply, such as license terms or otherwise. So without knowing all of the specific details of this water right claim, this is not an authorization to divert during September. However, this green status indicates that this water right is not curtailed because based on the water unavailability methodology, it's anticipated that water would be available to divert at its priority of right. So I hope that made things a little bit clearer. You could look down at the next right, the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. This right is curtailed in both August and September. So for the entirety of those months, diversions of natural flow, again, this does not include previously stored water, which would be released for diversion, but diversions of natural flow would not be permitted under this right in either month because it is under curtailment. If these statuses were to change, we would send out a weekly update saying the statuses on the list have changed, and water right holders can go and check their water right again. It may have stayed the same, or it may have changed. Somebody could go from being under curtailment to not under curtailment if more water becomes available due to a precipitation event. Conversely, if conditions worsen, a water user could potentially be curtailed, even if they were not initially curtailed, in which case they would have to cease diversions. Thanks.
Thank you, Jesse. So our next question is, does the monthly monitoring reporting only include water rights water, or does it also have to include stored water?
Yeah, and with this, I would ask to go back to slide 37, please. So I apologize, I know there's a lot of categories, but stored water would be included in number 3, 4, and 5 here. So if you are directly diverting previously stored water, so that would be 1 or 2, that would not be included in that reporting. You should only be reporting direct diversions that you're making from natural flow. If you're diverting to storage, so you are storing water, that should be reported under number 3, diversion to storage for any purpose. And then if the water right holder for that reservoir is releasing water, for either consumptive or non-consumptive use downstream, that would be reported under 4 or 5. But if you are a contract holder and you are solely diverting previously stored water under contract with a different water right holder, you would not be reporting under any of these categories. You would only be reporting under these if you are directly diverting natural flow, if you are storing water, or if you are releasing water from storage. Thanks.
Thanks, Jesse. And our next question is, do you plan to post the tutorial video well before the September 10th deadline so that we have sufficient time to gather all required data?
Yes, barring any technology errors with recording that should be posted in the coming days, hopefully with enough time to give folks to submit these forms. I would also encourage folks to take a look at these forms right now. You can log in to the survey portal, public.waterboards.ca.gov, with the login information provided on the initial orders mailed to you. And you can see these questions. And there's a lot of supporting text that describes exactly what I ran through today and what the tutorial will describe. So I encourage you to read that supporting information because I think that should be able to answer some questions.
Thanks, Jesse. And you might have answered this next question, which is there a text format for the definitions of the 5 different categories of enhanced reporting?
Yes, so again, that is present in the enhanced reporting form. Each of the questions, both for the past diversions and the projected demands, questions for each of these categories describes in great detail, I think even greater detail than I gave today, what should or should not be included. So it would encourage users to read those to help better understand what each category would include.
Thanks. Our next question is, can you draw a comparison to the typical annual reporting that we normally do? What is the same and what is different? For example, is the diversion to storage that you are requesting for enhanced reporting the same number that we would typically use for the annual water report?
Yes, could we move back to slide 37, please? And I do apologize. I know this is kind of new territory. We're not asking for exactly what we ask for in annual water rights reports, but to draw a parallel, so here we have 5 categories. Those annual water rights reports have 3 categories: direct to diversion, diversion to storage, and use. And so if I can group these 5 into those 3 categories you typically report. So direct diversion for consumptive use or non-consumptive use would together add up to that direct diversion amount you would report in your annual water rights reports. The diversion to storage for any purpose, category 3 here, that would be equivalent to the diversion to storage that you would report in your annual water rights reports. Finally, the use that you would report on annual reports, I think that would be equivalent to release from storage for consumptive use. This may depend on how water right holders typically report. I believe that a release from storage that is abandoned may not be reported in those annual reports, or perhaps it is and better explained in the comments. But as I understand it, that may be kind of a new category that is typically not included in the annual water rights reports. So again, the 2 direct diversion add up to the direct diversion you would report. Diversion to storage is diversion to storage. Release from storage for consumptive use is use. And then release from storage that's abandoned may be something that's typically not included on those annual reporting forms.
Thanks again, Jesse. The next question is, you've stated that water use should first be reported under the most senior right to the full extent of that right before reports of use for the same place of use under a less senior right. Now the question is, why? Does that subject the holders of rights and claims to loss of right due to lack of use? If the concern is forfeiture for non-use, that could be an issue if a junior right were unexercised for an extended period of time, but the reporting requirement only applies during this drought emergency and forfeiture for non-use is not an issue if water can't be used because it's unavailable.
So this is Dana Heinrich. I'm an attorney with the State Water Board. Gentlemen, I think you just read the answer as well as the question there. The reason for reporting under the senior right first is that it's consistent with water right principles, including the water right priority system. And to the extent that the questioner is concerned about forfeiture for non-use, that's really not going to be a concern during a drought emergency. Forfeiture occurs when a water right is not exercised for an extended period of time, which won't be the case during the effective period of the regulation. And also, generally speaking, forfeiture for non-use is not an issue where a water right can't be exercised because water is unavailable under that, under the priority of that water right.
Thanks, Dana. Our next question is, are there any penalties of the reporting if the reporting is past the due date?
Yeah, I can answer that question. Well, the best I can answer that question is there are potential penalties if the reporting is past the due date. The letter accompanying the August 20th order explains that the Water Code provides for penalties, including for violating the reporting requirements of the order. But as always, if there's specific circumstances that impact your ability to submit the reports by the deadline, reach out to us. Send those to the Bay Delta email and let us know, because we always take those into account. If you're impacted by current wildfires, that's relevant information. So please do reach out to us and let us know what's going on that may be impacting your ability to do it. So don't want to say there are penalties, there are potential penalties. So as always, reach out to us. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. And next we have a couple of questions I think are for Diane. The first is, when you indicate best estimates at time of submission, does that recognize data submitted in subsequently filed permittee reports could end up being much more precise based upon future reported data changes and availability of additional analysis time?
Yes, and this might answer some of the other questions that we're getting on this topic. I think the question is, how much water would you divert if water is available, so that we can have a better estimate of how much demand there is, whether there's supply to meet that demand or not. We want to understand, if we get precipitation events and runoff, how much water do individual users plan to take under their various water rights. We understand that those circumstances will change. You may desire to take water and have a demand for water, but not have the ability to divert that water, either because a curtailment order is in place, the supply did not exist. Perhaps you have a reservoir and the reservoir actually filled in an intervening time period and you didn't use as much water as you expected to use. There's a wide variety of reasons why the projected demand estimates may be different, and we would expect them to be different from the actual diversion information. So that is expected. We would also expect that as we get closer to the month in which you're projecting your demand for, that your information about your actual demands will be closer to what would be expected. So you know much better in the coming month what your demands may be versus 3 months from now. We understand that, and we understand that data is going to change as we move through the season, and that your annual reports will look different than the projected demand information. That answers that question. I'll go ahead and read the next question since that one's for me. Also, our releases for decision 1641 considered abandoned water in the report question number 5. No releases for decision 1641 we would consider to not be abandoned, because those releases are generally being made to meet water quality standards in the Delta. and they're not available for diversion by other users. So those should be, for the most part, considered not abandoned. And I think that's it. Turn it back over to you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Diane. Our next question is for Jesse. In the event of an error, can edits to reported diversions be made? What if it's 6 months prior? Can we edit data freely within the internet application, or is there another method?
Yeah, certainly understandable that data accuracy improves over time. If you need to correct an error in the prior diversions and the deadline to submit that form has not yet passed, you should just go into the form and make that correction. As I described, you can go through by clicking the survey link again. If you need to correct an error in prior diversions and the deadline to submit that form is passed, we do ask that you email us at bay-delta@waterboards.ca.gov that you need to correct some information, and we can help you along from there. So that would be in terms of the prior diversion information. We would love to get the accurate information on those if your data improves. But for the projected demands, we understand that those would change and become more refined as we approach the month for which those demands apply. For the September 10th deadline, you're going to be asked to project up through November. The October 10th deadline will go through December, and on with that rolling window of 3 months. You don't need to change an error in projected demands because understandably those change. You should just report the more updated projection in future months forms. Hopefully the accuracy of those would converge as you approach the next month. But please do contact us if you want to make changes to the prior diversions.
Great, thanks, Jesse. It looks like on our list, we only have a few more questions to go through. So if you're listening in and you have a question, please send those in through the chat box or through our bay-delta@waterboards.ca.gov email using the subject line 8-31 webinar question. So our next question is, what if you're required to report actual diversions and projected demand under the curtailment form, but direct diversion is from a storage facility through a hydro facility?
That's a good question. This could depend on the specific nature of those diversions. If those are typically hydro releases that are made and are what we call abandoned downstream, they have no further purposes, you would have to report those as direct diversions. Those are diversions from abandoned flows that you would be required to report. If you have a contract with that hydro facility that they are making those releases for your benefit and you are able to divert them as a result of that contract or agreement, you would not have to report them. This may require reaching out to discuss the specific circumstances of your right. So please feel free to do so through our email or phone line.
Thanks, Jesse. And our next question is, if 100% of the water our agency uses is coming from previously stored water up County Reservoir, and we use that water for a combination of hydropower, agricultural, residential, and CII, are we required to make monthly reports, or are we exempt from reporting?
I can go ahead and take that one. For every water right for which you received an order requiring reporting, the enhanced reporting, you need to fill that out. The disposition of your right and your diversions will depend upon what you fill into the various fields in the form. But if you are diverting under your water right, then you should be reporting that diversion under the water right. If you are diverting under a contract and you're not using an underlying water right, you should be reporting zeros in your enhanced reporting form. I think it's really going to depend whether Those diversions are occurring under your own water right or another water right or a contract. If you're diverting abandoned flows that are released from an upstream hydropower facility, then those would count as diversions under your own right. If they're contractual deliveries that are being provided, those would not count under your own right. And if you are re-diverting previously stored water that's occurring under your own right, then you would not need to report that re-diversion of previously stored water, but you would need to report the storage of that water. If that was storage that occurred earlier than in the year, then you would be reporting zeros for the time period in which you were not diverting under that right. So we're happy to, I think, walk through these issues in a little more detail if people need to do so. But I think the bottom line answer is that if you received a form, you need to fill out the form. If you're not diverting under water right, then you can indicate that you're not diverting and provide zeros in the various fields. But if you are diverting either abandoned flows or diverting water to storage, then you should be reporting those diversions.
Thank you, Diane. Our next question is, if we have multiple water rights, but our main water right covers all of our river diversions, do we have to report on each water right, or can we just report on our main water right?
I think Diane largely answered this. If that right covers those diversions, you should report them under that, but you would need to report zeros under your other water rights that you are not diverting under.
Great, thanks, Jesse. And it looks like we have a couple more questions. I'm going to do another last call for any questions from the audience. And so again, you can type in your question into the chat. You should see a chat icon at the bottom of your screen if you're participating through Zoom. And if you are calling in or you're watching the webcast, you can email your question to bay-delta@waterboards.ca.gov using the subject line 831 webinar question. With that, while we wait for more questions to come in, I'm going to quickly pivot to our resources slide. So if we can advance the slide deck, please. I guess while we wait for the slide deck to change, I'll just verbally go over the resources that we have available for folks to contact us and stay informed. So if you have any questions, especially those circumstantial or site-specific questions, please send an email to bay-delta@waterboards.ca.gov, or you can call the Delta Drought phone line at 916-319-0960. Staff are monitoring the email inbox and that phone line, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. We also strongly encourage you to subscribe to the Delta Drought email list if you haven't already done so, to receive important information regarding curtailment orders in the Delta watershed. To sign up, you just visit the Delta Drought and Curtailment webpage at waterboards.ca.gov/drought/Delta and provide your email in the email subscription list box under the Stay Informed header, which you can find at the bottom of the webpage. So if you visit the webpage and you don't see that subscription box, just keep scrolling and it will be at the bottom. Staff will be updating this webpage as well as the water unavailability methodology webpage with current information. So we encourage everyone to visit these sites frequently. With that,
Gentlemen, I can maybe we've gotten a few questions on the question of the projected demands and what we're asking for there. I think what we are asking for is if your water right is not curtailed, what do you project your demands to be? And whether you'll be for the upcoming months. Again, we recognize that as we get closer to the upcoming month that you'll have better information about what your needs may be, particularly for those who divert water to storage in a reservoir. So I think that covers a variety of the questions that have been asked. We are, in terms of how we're going to use this information, we are going to use that particularly in the storage season. Needs vary depending upon storm events, the status of the reservoir. It will be helpful for us to understand what you think your needs are based on the specific circumstances in this year versus the best available information we have until now is previous reported use information. We would like to have the advantage of this additional information to help us to understand how are the specific needs playing out in this year, particularly when you get into the spring and fall and winter rainy season, when demands may vary substantially based on the status of your reservoir and whether you have space to store water and whether storm events occur. So that's really why we want that information, is to help to refine our demand estimates and look at those in combination with historical use information or diversion information so that we can have a better understanding of how demands may be changing in this particular year, given the particular circumstances of the reservoir. So hopefully that answers a number of questions that we've gotten on that topic. With that, I'll turn it back over to you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you, Diane, for hopping in. Our next question is, for staff that are looking at our log, it's question 19. How would you report a hydropower release of natural flow for D1641?
So as described, a release to meet D1641 requirements would not be considered abandoned downstream if that release is intended to meet water quality and outflow requirements in the Delta. It would not be considered abandoned. So that release should be reported as a release from storage for downstream use.
Okay, thank you, Trustee. And I am looking at question 21 for staff. Does the enhanced reporting of prior diversions and projected demand have to match our final numbers for the annual water right reporting in ERIMS? Typically, corrected data takes months to prepare and review, which will not make the September 10th deadline.
It is absolutely not expected to match perfectly. We understand that time garners better data, and we do not expect these numbers to match perfectly with the annual water rights reporting. These are the best available data that you have access to at the time the reporting is due.
Thank you. There was a second part to that question, or maybe perhaps a second question. What is the best way to estimate potential storage when it is entirely dependent on rainfall?
Not being Diane, do you want to go?
Sure, I can go ahead and answer that. I think what we're interested to know is if there is rainfall, if water is available, how much water would you divert in a particular month? My expectation would be that, if you've got the right to store water in a particular month and you've got a deficit in your reservoir, that if there's a rain event that you would divert that water to storage. And, but if there's some other reason, got a bypass flow requirement, There are some other factors involved, and that's what we're interested in, is understanding what the demand for water is that exists rather than the diversions. How much water do people wish to use if the water is available, so that we can understand if a storm event comes in, or we get runoff from prior storm events, how much water do water users intend to take under their water right if they are not curtailed.
Okay, thank you, Diane. And our last question is, how much time do you estimate it will take to prepare the data and fill out the enhanced reporting form for a typical water right?
Yeah, obviously this could change for any given diverter and the complexity of their water rights. Some will be more difficult, some will be easier. But the board did estimate in its fiscal impacts analysis that the initial enhanced reporting form could take 4 hours of staff time, 4 days of staff time. That's including analytical work and review, and that subsequent monthly reports would take less time than the first one. We estimated 1.5 days overall, including analytical and probably upper management review for those forms. Obviously, it can change. If it can take you less time, take less time. But that was the estimate that the board had in the fiscal impacts analysis.
Great, thank you. And I saw we had one more question coming through the chat. And the question is, would one include D1641 release requirements in their demand projection?
Yes, thank you for clarifying these items around D1641. Again, if releases are anticipated to be needed to meet D1641 requirements, those should be reported as projected releases from storage for downstream use.
Great, thanks, Jesse. I think that concludes our question and answer portion, unless folks have any last minute questions that they would like to ask. I will go over the resources page, for folks again. So if we didn't get to your questions, or if you had a question that comes up after, or you would like to follow up with staff to discuss your specific circumstance, please send an email to bay-delta@waterboards.ca.gov, or you can call our phone line at 916-319-0960. And you can leave a voicemail with your contact information, and staff will be getting back to you as soon as possible. And again, please subscribe to the Delta Drought email list if you haven't already. You can do so through the waterboards.ca.gov/drought/Delta webpage. Scroll to the bottom until you see the banner that says Stay Informed, and enter in your email address and subscribe there. Additionally, staff will be updating the water unavailability methodology webpage with current information, so we encourage everyone to visit both of those sites frequently. And I see another question about how soon this recording will be posted online. The recording of this webinar should be posted on that waterboards.ca.gov/drought/Delta webpage within the next couple of days or sooner.
I want to add, we will send an email to that Delta Drought email list to notify subscribers when this video has been posted.
Great, thank you, Jesse. And that concludes today's webinar. And thank you so much for your participation, for your questions, and thank you to all of the staff that presented, responded to questions, and that helped supported the back end of the Zoom webinar. We appreciate your time and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.